And just like that, the Philadelphia 76ers season is over. It wasn't but a week or two ago that they looked to be a true contender to reach the NBA Finals, but instead they're beginning their offseason not even halfway through May. It wasn't all lost though, as that series against the Celtics should be just the first of many battles for Eastern Conference supremacy over the coming seasons between the two young teams, and each of them have a ton of interesting decisions to make this summer, not the least of which for Philadelphia is what to do in free agency, and more specifically about signing LeBron James. Though it would stand to reason that if the King wanted to bring his talents to Philly, then they would welcome him with open arms. But when you look at it a bit deeper, that may not be the case. My name is Tucker, this is Sporting Logically, and here's why the Philadelphia 76ers should not sign LeBron James. When I first heard about the idea that LeBron James would consider joining the up-and-coming Philadelphia 76ers as a free agent this offseason if he decided to leave Cleveland, I was really excited about the possibility. I wanted him to try and take the Sixers to the next level and free us from the constant Warriors-Cavs finals rematches that have grown stale for many fans. But to even make this possible in the first place, there are some roster moves to consider. The Sixers are one of the few teams in the league with cap space this summer, by virtue of Ben Simmons still being on his rookie contract. But in order to make enough space to sign LeBron to the full max, they'll have to find a taker for Jared Bayless's expiring deal of just over $8 million, likely having to attach an asset in a trade to do so, while also letting JJ Redick, Amir Johnson, Marco Bellinelli, and Ersan Ilyasova come off the books when their contracts expire this offseason. They could potentially bring some of those guys back on discounted deals after they sign James if it all worked out, but there's obviously a risk that they could lose all of those guys, each of which have played a pretty big part in their emergence in the East this season. Getting rid of Bayless's contract won't be very easy either, as not many teams will have the space to absorb his contract, and even fewer would be interested in helping them create the space needed to sign LeBron. There are other more complex moves they could make to make it happen, but the idea is already getting pretty messy. On paper, the team would gladly lose those guys and the asset in the Bayless trade to get LeBron. Any team would. But who's to say how long they'd have him on the roster? James is notorious for signing one-and-one deals, a 2-year max deal with an opt-out after the first season, in order to maximize his flexibility and ability to enter free agency more often. So what if the Sixers give up those guys and assets I just mentioned, and then 2 years from now, LeBron decides to head back to Cleveland or to the Lakers to finish his career? Yeah, they would have had James for 2 years, but just because he signs with a team this summer doesn't mean it will be the final team of his career despite his age. It certainly wouldn't be as damaging to the Sixers as it was to the Cavs and Heat when he left those franchises. But to risk a setback in the growth of this team, with how strong the Celtics look to be, could ruin their chances of competing for championships for the foreseeable future. Let's face facts. Ben Simmons can't shoot jumpers, doesn't shoot jumpers, and doesn't look to be even close to having an NBA level form on his jump shot, unless he switches hands. It could be years before he develops that skill, if he ever does. That's why those guys I mentioned earlier, with the exception of Amir Johnson, have been so crucial to the team's success this season. Without spacing and shooting around him, Simmons' game is much less effective, and he needs the ball in his hands a lot in order to be as impactful as possible. That isn't a knock on Simmons. He isn't the only young star that plays this way, but it does create a questionable fit alongside LeBron James. Though he is an improved jump shooter, LBJ won't be spacing the floor with his shooting the same way Redick has for Philly, even in the very limited amount of time he doesn't have the ball in his hands on offense. The Sixers have created such a bright future for themselves, so would they really want to stunt the growth of their young star by playing with a guy that will take the ball out of his hands a lot rather than build the team around him with spacing and two-way players? It might work in the short term, but what could the long-term impact be? Simmons may never reach his potential because he wasn't allowed to grow as the true superstar of the team. And even more worrying, that could cause him to become unhappy and leave the team in the future. Let's face it, as great as he is, there's a lot of evidence to say that it's not easy playing with LeBron James. Some guys are made for it and some aren't, and those that aren't often find themselves on the outside looking in the team dynamic. That sounds like a ton of risk to me for the future of the Sixers. As we get closer to the summer, it's becoming apparent that there might be some other options that are a better fit for both the timeline and roster construction of the Sixers team. Kawhi Leonard could be pushing his way out of San Antonio, and though it's pretty much assumed that Paul George is gone to LA at this point, he might be intrigued by what Philly has going. I've even seen doable scenarios in which the Sixers sign George in free agency and then trade for Leonard, giving them a dominant four-man group that would terrorize the East for years to come. If they have a chance to get either one of those players, I would argue that they would be a better fit for the team than LeBron James. They're each younger, better off-ball players and shooters, better and more willing defenders at this point in their careers, and more likely to sign contracts to stick around longer than 2 years. Obviously, there's no guarantee that they would be able to get either of those guys, but if they're going to go the free agent route this summer and add some star power, that would be the direction I would recommend. You could also make a pretty compelling argument that star power isn't what this team needs in the first place. Philly has two of the more unique young stars the league has seen in a while, a point guard with the size of a big and the athleticism of a wing, along with a big that can shoot jumpers and a punishing post game to decimate the more switch-heavy defenses of the modern NBA. When you add in Dario Saric and the potential of Markelle Fultz, the team could already have all the top-end talent they need. Obviously, there are question marks with every player I just mentioned: Simmons' inability to shoot, Saric's ceiling, and injury concerns with Fultz and Embiid. But adding another star isn't necessarily going to help the Sixers solve any of those problems. What could help them the most is taking a page out of the Houston Rockets playbook. Get as many two-way players as you can, wings and guards that can defend and shoot, to surround these young stars with the spacing and defensive versatility they need. Those guys aren't as easy to find as I'm making it sound, but they're out there to be had in free agency and the draft. If you see the Celtics as the Sixers' main competition in the East once LeBron is done, then they're going to need much better wings to guard the likes of Gordon Hayward, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. Those are three very skilled, versatile players with great size, and Philly struggled to match up with them this year, especially considering Robert Covington looked nearly unplayable for 4 of the 5 games. Just adding George or Leonard isn't going to fully solve that issue. They need more than just one player. So sacrificing assets and cap space just to get one guy doesn't make a ton of sense to me, LeBron or otherwise. On top of that, this whole argument revolves around the idea that A, LeBron actually leaves the Cavs, and B, he wants to join the Sixers. Though I think both of those are pretty likely, a lot of things could change in the next few weeks and months. But once you get past the excitement of James bringing his experience and game to the young Sixers, and start to look at it from a contractual and roster construction perspective, it becomes more and more clear that should LeBron James want to bring his talents to Philadelphia, the Sixers would have to give strong consideration to telling an all-time great no. And that is the end of the video. Thank you all very much for watching. I don't expect this to be an all that popular opinion, so I look forward to seeing what you guys have to say in the comments below. If you liked the video, then leaving a like rating is a great way to let me know, and if you'd like to see more videos just like this, then be sure to subscribe to Sporting Logically for more content every single week. Thanks again, and I will see you all next time.